Our world is lost in unnecessary fear and hurt. Our systems seem scientifically engineered to make you small, powerless, and always waiting for the next great leader who will fix the problems around us. Worse, we're witnessing neighbor versus neighbor while warfare breaks out around our family tables. But you have access to a spirit, a strength that enlarges and empowers you. Even better, you don't need to wait for the next big movement. You can heal the world. It's time for governance by grace. Welcome to Gracearchy with Jim Babka. We got to talk about Governor Abbott. That cat, man, he could be sending people like he could bus people to California, and yet he's sending them everywhere. It's what is it, 15, almost 16,000 people now, and he tweeted on this, 8,900 to DC in front of the vice president's house, right? 4,900 to the New York City people, 1,500 to Chicago, and 690 to Philadelphia. Not a one of them to his close near neighbor, the great blue state of California. And he had the gall to say, if Biden does nothing, Texas is taking unprecedented action to provide relief to our overwhelmed border communities. And I want to just say right now, with all the grace that I can, bless you, Texas border communities, because I know what you must be going through. So let's just start there, and then we'll take Governor Abbott apart. How can we do that and still be graceful?
Well, let's be honest about where the governor's at. The governor is operating a program whereby he makes Texas poor, and he makes these blue sanctuary cities wealthier. That's what he's doing.
Of course, he'd disagree with you, but let's explain how.
Okay. So the very first term we're going to go over is GDP, which is basically the entire size of the economy. So if everybody is producing a certain amount and I add in more people and they produce as well, it's simple addition. The GDP expands. And that, the disease here is very, very, very short-term thinking. It's looking at basically the first weeks and months that a class of immigrants arrives. It won't be long before they are working and producing and being a part of the system. They're going to be consuming, so that they're going to be expanding the pie that way, and then they're going to be producing, which is how we actually create wealth, and they're going to add to the value of the economy.
Works for me.
They just have to.
I've seen it. I lived in Southern California most of my life, and I've seen that work over and over and over again. I mean, look at the surnames of so many of the professionals in Southern California right now and beyond. And you can see Vietnamese, you can see Japanese, you can see Korean, you can see Chinese. And I know personally Vietnamese kids that grew up in sort of my generation whose parents were literally escaping from Vietnam when they could, escaping. And, and those folks have become incredible citizens of the United States and given back. And, Governor Abbott, you're missing.
This gets into the second part of the economic equation, which is the per capita income, because people are going to say, well, Jim, you're cheating. All these people come in and they depress each individual's wealth a little bit. Maybe the whole pie is bigger, but our slice of it is a bit smaller. We have a little bit less to get on. They take our jobs, for example. So let's break this down and look at this very carefully. First of all, there is the concept of specialization, which is a general concept in economics, is very well understood to mean that it's a source of wealth if we don't have to know how to do everything. The more things that you have to do to provide for yourself, whether it's, go out and hunt and kill your own food, is for example, just to pick that one, would mean that you had spent less time at your trade, which you can then subsequently trade in, and you can't specialize as much. And then consequently, you are poor. And your community's poor because you're not providing the service either. So the best possible outcome is specialization, and specialization is accelerated by the presence of more people. It's just that simple. So if you're Robinson Crusoe on an island, you may want to specialize, but you can't, right? But the more people that come into your community, the more opportunities there are to specialize in certain things. Now, then there's specialization in specific, which is one of the arguments that's made here is some people say, well, if we can get some really talented people from foreign countries, with advanced degrees and, different skills or whatever, those people come over. We want the really talented people. Well, actually, you want all of them. You also want the low cost labor to come here. So I'm gonna ask you a question. I want to illustrate this if I may.
Sure. Shoot.
Pick something that you don't really enjoy doing very much. You have to do it. It's part of your drudgery. It's part of your list of chores, so to speak. You've got to do this thing. And if someone would come along and cheaply and able to do it, that you would drop it in a heartbeat. What is that thing? And what would you do with your time instead?
Oh man, the number one thing is calls to customer care, tech support calls and stuff. I would get out of that lane so fast.
Okay. So if you had somebody who was with a foreign accent talking on the phone to someone else with a foreign accent, because that's what you get with a call anyway, right?
You bet, brother. Right now.
Going through and dealing with that stuff, and they would be willing to do it rather inexpensively, right? They specialize in I know how to fix this. That's something you would pay for.
In a moment. Absolutely.
Okay, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, you just heard a business opportunity right there. That's how things are invented. Services are created. That's how people get rich. They see problems and they go, wait a minute, I know how to solve that problem. So I don't know what the solution to that is. We're not going to get into that today, but I want to talk about specialization.
Yeah, my contact info is in the show notes.
So if we could get someone to do that work for you, you would be happy to hand it off. Now, what would you do instead?
Oh, I'd spend so much more time. I love music, so I would be in music even more than I already am. Jim, I'd be doing my passion, what I love.
And almost everybody feels that way. And it's possible even that your passion could be something that becomes profitable to other people around you. It comes to benefit others.
Don't push your luck there. I am a musician. Don't push your luck on the profitability, but we're hoping.
Okay. So, but the specialization in specific means that all of us can benefit from general waves of immigration, not high talent immigration, but general labor immigration. We can all benefit from that. And we all have something. Every one of us, every person watching right now is stuck doing something that they don't want to do. And if someone came along and said, I'll do that thing for you, and the price was low enough, they would hand it away.
In a minute. Done.
Okay. This is new work that's being created because right now you're doing it. So it's not like somebody who provides the service is missing out on your business. You already made a decision. You're not going to pay for that. This is the thing you're going to do yourself. But if someone comes along and says, I'll do it cheaper, you go, wait a minute, maybe I need to reconsider my priorities here, right? I could trade a little bit and then I could spend more time on my music. And both you and they are wealthier. And no one loses anything because it wasn't a job that got taken from somebody else. You with me?
Oh, yeah.
Lastly, in terms of per capita, because per capita is the long-term factor. There's the GDP is going to show up pretty quick. And it's almost like the people that don't understand this, there's almost like an infantile, childlike mindset of that there's this finite pie and I got to make sure I got mine. And I'm saying to you that that's not the case. But when we start to look at this more long-term and we start to look at the per capita wealth that's created by the presence of new people in an economy, it comes because some of those people are not just going to work, but they're going to be extra industrious and they're going to start businesses. And we see this in every wave of immigration. So just not far from me, we have South Asian populations that have moved in here. Karen, my wife has one of her best friends now is Karen. Go look it up if you don't know what it is. But there's a couple of different peoples in that area, Nepali, different people, and they're setting up businesses and shops all the way down the road. It's their business, their community. You could see it starting to thrive. And then their children will go on and get education. They will make sure that their children take advantage of the system. And that following generation will also create even more wealth. And so the places, these sanctuary cities to which these people are going that are being welcomed, they're going to long-term, they're going to expand the wealth of those communities, both in terms of GDP and even more important per capita. Everybody is going to see their per capita wealth going up. Everybody, not just the immigrants.
I don't want to brag, but Governor Abbott, how big is California's economy? Like in the world?
Yeah.
And We haven't gotten there because a bunch of white guys kept a bunch of people with other skin color out of the state. We've gotten there because everyone in California understands the importance of working together. And we may not care for each other's political views, but we get it, you know? It's about all
You
of
are
us.
hitting on something really super important that's hidden and subtle in this whole thing. If you wanted to devise a program to create more blue, more Democrat votes, you could hardly do better than take the people who are coming in and ship them off to sanctuary cities, because they're going to remember whose door was open and whose door was closed. And they're not in your community anymore. They're in another community, making it wealthier. And they're going to set down roots there, and they're going to remember when they vote who welcomed them and who shut them out. And how do I know that this is true? Is this just an abstraction, a theoretical speculation? No, Bill, you raise exactly the case study. So there was a governor of California, a Republican, the second to last Republican governor. His name's Pete Wilson. Pete
Yeah, I
Wilson
remember Pete.
saw the trend coming where the party was starting to say, we don't want immigrants in here. We want to do something about illegal immigration. And as they turned up the heat on this issue, he said, this is destroying us. And now, where is the Republican Party in California? This is virtually non-existent.
Giving everybody a chance to listen to those crickets.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on that there. I didn't know that was coming. But yes, that's exactly the case. They're losing, and the Democrats have control of all the statewide offices, both houses of the state legislature, the vast amount of the bureaucracy. The policies there are blue policies. So Governor Abbott is, and maybe Texas will stay red for a bit longer, but they are making other parts of the country that have greater population and will continue to have greater population. Their areas will shrink because, by the way, your children will start to leave and your grandchildren start to leave and go to these areas of economic opportunity. That's what will happen. They'll move to the big city where people specialized and per capita income is higher.
And you know something that's really wonderful about immigrants is that we kind of hang together. You know, I know my family several generations back hung together as sort of a German enclave within the Midwest, and then started to branch out after they got their legs on the ground, you know. And that happens here in California too. You see communities spring up and they help each other, and they make it possible to thrive. And I know everybody's going to say it's expensive to live in California and look at all the problems in San Francisco and the homeless thing and blah blah blah. But we're doing it. We're doing it because we have the heart to help one another. And that, I think, is really important. And I want to note that this exists in Texas too.
Yes, it does.
You know, and that's a huge quality. If we can figure out how to leverage that, all the boats will rise. The tide will rise for everybody.
I've never understood. There's something I just fundamentally don't understand. So I have a friend who lives in Florida, and he says all my neighbors are Mexican, and he lives not too far outside of Orlando. He'll recognize himself if he's listening. He is a listener to the show, and he's like, they're great people. They're religious. They're family oriented. They get up and go to work every day. They're gone most of the day because they're at work. So they're hardworking. And he said, yeah, they celebrate on the weekends. Like when they get some downtime, they have a good time. They let their hair down. And he said, they're fun. But he said, man, these are the people that should have been more conservative. They are more conservative in their personal demeanor, but they don't find themselves welcome by the people who maybe would be more prone to share some of their values. At least there'd be some distribution division on this. And listen, I don't care. You know, if you're not Republican, Democrat, I don't give a hoot about either one of them. I think they're both ruining the country. But to be clear, Governor Abbott believes, and his supporters believe, that they're really showing them. They're really showing them. And the people that care about this the most will be dead by the time most of the impact of this hits. You're not leaving a better country for your kids in this process. You're really not. You're making bad political and financial decisions.
One more grace point, Jim. I'll challenge you to see if you can find something new in all this that we haven't yet said.
I pointed out a book to you as I was thinking about this episode. 1 Billion Americans by Matthew Iglesias.
Yeah, right.
So when he says 1 billion, he wants to dramatically increase the population, and billion's a nice symbolic number. We have about 300 million, 330 million Americans right now, maybe 340. He wants to dramatically increase the population. He happens to be on the political left. He's an economist on the political left. And he wants to increase the population by hook or by crook. And so that includes two things. That includes robust immigration, and that includes an increase in birth rates. Those are both part of what he's suggesting. And the focus of his argument is on China and competing with China, because China is very, very big. And he's saying, if we want to compete, we need to be bigger. So I want to run you through a couple of analogy type of things to kind of sum up this argument. I don't fully agree with all of his prescriptions about how to get there and so forth, but there's some basic things. And these were some ideas that I had that maybe would help communicate the value of more people in terms of being competitive in the world stage. You ready?
Yeah, that's cool. I'm listening.
All right, let's play football. And let's pretend you're a coach. We're going to start you off as an NFL coach. You have 53 guys on your team. That's the rules, okay? Your opponent's team has 53 guys. But now imagine that you decided that every player on your team could be paid more, because there's a pie, right? We could pay everybody more if we cut the team size. So we're going to cap your team at 35 players. How successful do you think your team's going to be long-term against the team that has 53?
It's about 3 games. I'd be down to having like barely enough to field an offense and a defense.
Yeah. So no one would place themselves under that constraint voluntarily if they wanted to win games. If you want to be competitive, you're not going to say, well, we got to make sure instead of dividing the salary 53 ways, we're only going to divide it 35. You just wouldn't do it. Okay.
Doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make any sense. And by the way, it's not even a good long-term recipe for the 35, because if they're losers, they don't see their pay raise. The people that get credit, the people that get endorsement deals, for example, in sports, are the ones who happen to have be on winning teams, be involved in championship programs. So you don't want to cut the size of your team. Okay, so number 2, let's talk about talent pool. Now, again, we're competing against, this is a competition, and we're going to do football once again, but this time I'm going to make you a college coach. Don't consider that a demotion. Some of these college jobs are very cushy and last for a long time.
Gosh. And lucrative.
Okay. Yes, it's not uncommon that the highest paid bureaucrat in any given state is the coach of the number 1 football program in that state.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Let's say you live in Texas now. You're in Texas. And it's one of the largest states. And football is like the state religion there. Okay. Now, once upon a time, true story, there was a requirement for schools to give out a certain number of their scholarships to boys who lived in the state, residents of the state.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
A certain percentage of the team had to go there. That's been lifted. That's not the rule. Long time ago. But let's say in a fit of virtue signaling, your bosses come and tell you that you can only recruit from Texas now. Will your program become a powerhouse under those circumstances if you're the only one playing by that rule?
As good as everything, as Pop Warner High School, whatever, as good as it all is, it's not enough.
No.
You've got to have a bigger talent pool. It just won't work without.
So you said, I'm not going to be in these other 49 states, and you're probably not even going to win every recruitment battle in your own state. Some kids are going to leave.
Yeah.
Right. This is you've tied yourself, and this is exactly what people are proposing to do with our immigration programs. We're going to restrain who can come in here and where we can go find talent. We got to make sure we keep it all here within the United States. Okay. 3. Don't we want China's best players on the field? Like, they have some all-stars. If we had a chance to recruit those all-stars to be on our team, all of Asia, for that matter, all of Africa and Europe and so forth, don't we want all of the best players on our team? If we have a chance to recruit them, this is what I call a +2 situation. They don't have them anymore, and we do. So
Exactly.
now we're even better positioned competitively. Our country should be wealthier because of that, right?
Right. Yeah.
So we should be opening the door as much as possible and trying to bring this talent in. And there's some specific things to say about that. Number 1, we lead in the terms of the number of Nobel Prizes, for example, that we get, and scientific awards and so forth. Why? Well, it turns out that the people that are here, they're either first or second generation that win these awards. The Americans that win them tend to overwhelmingly be first and second generation. So they are able to come to the place where they can maximize their ability to achieve those things. And we benefit as a result.
Yep.
Okay. So we want the very best players to come to play on our team. We want the largest pool to go out and reach to find all players, the players we need. And we want more people. period, because we don't want to be stuck competing against a team that's a lot bigger. And essentially, this is what Matthew Iglesias was getting at. I haven't read the book. But this part of it, this little bit of it, I understand that the idea of the more people that we have here, it has already been worked out. This was worked out a couple of years ago. This is a major study that theorized soundly, in my opinion, that if all constraints on human movement were lifted from country to country across the planet, and people could go wherever they wanted to thrive and succeed, they would choose places like the United States. And by the way, tiny little rabbit trail, we should be happy about this. We should be like, we win. When people have a choice between where they want to go, they don't want to go to some of these other places. They want to come here. This means this is the promised land. And that's something that we should be like, hey, look at us. We're the promised land. And we should be proud of that rather than trying to acting as if we're embarrassed and cutting off our own nose to spite our face. But this study said that if everybody could go where they wanted, world GDP would double. We'd all be we'd have twice as much wealth floating around.
Yeah, I'm down with that, man. You can see it happening. Our neighbors to the north, they have a target of something like 1.5 million immigrants in the next 10 years or something like that. I don't know what the exact target and the time frame, but it's 1.5 million is the number that's sticking in my head. That's a healthy program. That's saying,
well,
hey,
it is, except I don't want to plan for it. It is, except I don't want to plan for it.
I'm with you.
I want individual human beings to make that decision.
We want to have a choice, yes. And I'm not saying that the government planning is the way to make this happen. I'm taking the handcuffs off. Let it happen. But I love your idea about being able to choose where you're most productive in the world, where you feel the most safe, where you feel you can thrive, if healthcare is an issue, find a country that does healthcare the way you want it, right? If opportunity is an issue, find that, and we don't get to see the potential until we start to take some of the lids off, stir the pot, see what's inside. Mm-hmm. So this is a great approach. So that book, I'll post it in the show notes, but it's called 1 Billion Americans, people.
Right. And I want to be clear. I'm not a fan of all of Iglesias's approaches, because he also wants to dramatically expand the government to make some of this stuff happen.
Oh, of course he does.
Programs, right?
Well, that's the answer, don't you know?
Yeah, we don't need to do any of that. And a lot of it is very ill-conceived. But the intent or the direction that he's going here is right. It's fundamentally sound. And these arguments I just shared with you, making you a football coach, Bill, that's not in the book either. I don't want to mislead anybody. These you asked me for some independent thinking here. I was a little inspired by his title more than anything else and what I understood the book to contain.
Makes sense to me. And it's a whole lot better than the Abbott busing program. Sorry, the Texas busing program. It's going to exist long after Governor Abbott's gone. I'm sure they'll be still doing stuff like that. It takes a while.
He could do whatever he wants. I want the people in his state. I want individuals in his state, there to be fewer and fewer, who are proud of this activity and start to recognize its inherent foolishness.
Yeah, and I'll tease the next episode, because not only is it un-American, it's not biblical. And we need to make that very clear, especially in the Bible Belt, what the Bible actually says about immigration. So we'll do that in the next episode. So what about the people that say that having more immigration flooding into America dilutes our culture in some way? How do we respond gracefully to that?
Matthew Iglesias notes, and I thank Dave Henderson, he's a Facebook friend of mine, for pointing this out in an article for Cato. But Iglesias in his book noted that in 2018, the U.S. fertility rate fell to an all-time low of 1.72 births over the lifetime of the average woman. That's a negative growth, because it takes two people to procreate. And so instead of having produced two, which would have been even or better, which would have expanded the population, it's actually now a negative rate, which has a lot of effect on various social programs, particularly Social Security and Medicare, in the long term. Some really grave consequences coming down the pike. We discussed with Steve Barrow in an earlier episode, which I know you're going to post in the link in the show notes as well. Yep. We discussed why more human beings being born was better for everyone involved. It was better for the general economy. It was better for a family. This idea that you can't afford it, we address that. This is, by the way, a widespread belief in the 20-somethings right now. So if you're having issues with that, you go back and listen to that episode. Steve Barrows really makes a very good, compelling case. And I want to call it pro-life. I don't mean this in the abortion debate sense. I mean in the, we want more human beings. We recognize the inherent worth and value that human beings bring to society. But Iglesias does it, who's coming at this from the left now, says that there's an important factor here, and that is that that is the cost. So if you think of this in strictly economic terms, where if it's expensive to have children, then just like anything else, there's going to be fewer of them. And right now, that is definitely the perception, if not the reality, that it's expensive to have children, or it's expensive maybe to get to the home, to buy the first home. And so that's got to be delayed. And then subsequently, maybe the children that are going to be living in that home need to be delayed, or we need to agree to live in smaller quarters where we can't afford to have as many children. So when all else is equal, people are going to have fewer children if they don't think they can afford them. And Iglesias' solution to this is a subsidy, and yet another subsidy. But I think that we have to have a discussion too. Yes, I think we have to have a discussion twofold.
Hold on a second. So
All
we're
right.
taking the existing zero-sum pie, and we're saying we're going to use more of our borrowed future to subsidize something that we think is, as social engineers, that we can control. That's the proposal?
That's his proposal.
Okay. Well,
so
we can
give him an A for recognizing the problem and the correct resolution to that problem, right? More babies, right?
More babies.
He recognizes the benefit of it, but he's saying that we should have a program that basically would give every household $300 a month for every child they have, which would,
well, that'll go a long way.
It's not going to cover everything, no doubt, but sometimes if you could just lower the cost of something, enough people decide to jump on, right?
Yeah, true.
Okay, so I
derailed your train of thought.
I want to approach this. I want to approach this from, first of all, from a moral philosophical point. Conservatives tend to argue that they are pro-family, and if you're pro-family, you should be having more family. That's the number one way that you demonstrate that you're pro-family. You can bleat all you want about how other people should be living their lives, but the real way that you demonstrate you're pro-family is you have a family and you have more of that family. That's the number one way you do that. Okay. There is no number two in comparison. That's it. So stop talking and start, make love. Okay. Just get to it. All right.
That's good advice for everybody these days.
Yes, it is. Okay. But I have this hidden feeling that a lot of these people's position is actually hidden in bigotry. And I base this on the fact that if you say to them, we should have more people coming, they will immediately make arguments about illegal immigrants, so there's a solution to something being illegal. You change the law and you make it legal. And if you say, we want to make it legal and we want to bring in, they say, no, we can't have them because they're going to dilute our culture. They're going to change voting patterns. They're going to do a variety of other things. I don't know why that necessarily has to be true. We discussed earlier, if they were more welcomed in certain places, they should naturally be constituents in a relative breakdown, but probably lean a little bit more conservative, honestly, in most cases, or resonate with that message if they were wanted and accepted in those areas. But this just doesn't work. Because they're not actually going after the real target or the real problem. If having more children is more expensive, and this is true across the board for everybody in the country, this means there's probably a government problem that's driving all of this. The government's too big. It takes way too much money. It regulates way too much. It does a variety of things that suppress the economy's ability to produce and make it harder and harder to get in. Now, let me just take one before we go. Let me just throw one out so I can make clear what it is I'm trying to say. You will notice that the things that the government subsidizes are the most expensive things in our society. And the things that they have very little involvement are the places that have the most technological advancement, and they keep going, and the cost keeps going down. Everybody's heard of Moore's Law. Moore's Law only works because the government is largely out of the way. The more that they subsidize, the more they're going to break that thing. But let's just take housing as an example, because this is a real central concern to the people that we're talking to right now. Government has heavily subsidized housing, and they did a lot for my generation. I'm in my 50s. They did an awful lot to help us get into housing. And consequently, the price of housing has gone up, 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 up. So that the entry point, the point where you're jumping on the ladder, the bottom rungs of it have been cut off. And it's a bigger leap to get up on top. And so consequently, they're making the decision to have fewer children. Now, if you really want to have a pro-family policy, you would take your eyes off the immigration ball and you would turn around and you say, you politicians have really messed us up. And we need to knock off this nonsense where we're going to help people buy houses, get schooling, all these other things that they're doing, because it turns out we've actually made it more prohibitive, not less. We've actually because we've made it more expensive. We've artificially driven up the costs on our own, and we should have stopped. That is the most pro-family policy. And if we reversed all of these things, yeah, there's going to be a temporary moment of readjustment where everybody's got to get their feet underneath them because the world will dramatically change. They were making plans on other bases. But if we turned this around, it wouldn't be long. And I mean, it wouldn't be long, a couple of years tops, before we started into a new pattern where things started to get more affordable and people's attitudes about all these things changed. So stop the obsession with why immigrants are making your life bad. It's rich, smug, well-fed politicians and the people who support them. And you might even be one of them that's
Governor Abbott.
so against Governor Abbott. You're supporting Governor Abbott, bringing us to this really difficult discussion we have to have today. And by the way, if I managed to offend you in what I said today, good. Go look in the mirror, assess your soul. We're going to come back in the next episode, and we're going to talk about how God viewed the immigrant. We want more people here. We're pro-life in that standpoint. We want them to come. The door should be open. Our lamp should be up. This is the city on the hill. It should be the city on the hill instead of us wrecking it.